The Bitcoin Group, the American original. For over the last 10 seconds, the sharpest Satoshis, the best Bitcoins, the hardest cryptocurrency talk. We'd like to welcome our panelists, Chris Ellis from World Crypto Network,
Hello.
Will Pangman from Topeki,
Hi.
and Christoph Atlas from Anonymous Bitcoin Book.
Hey, everybody.
And I'm Thomas Hunt from Mad Bitcoin. Issue 1. Ross Ulbricht trial delayed until January 2015 in order to give the defense more time to prepare against the prosecution's terabytes of data. The trial has been delayed until January 2015. Previously, the judge had dismissed the defense's motions about how the FBI obtained the location of the Silk Road server and if they violated the law to do so. Chris Ellis, your thoughts?
Yeah, I read the article. I was a bit disappointed for him, but it is for the defence's benefit that they get more time to look at the evidence. I'd also quite like to go back over quite how they found out the location of the server in the first place, which they said they did by, the FBI said they did by putting lots of different characters into the form fields of the website, and then apparently it spat out its IP address. Now, I haven't done InfoSec in a little while, but I'm pretty sure that just doesn't happen all by itself. And I'd quite like us to kind of go through it. And one of the things that I'm looking at the moment is doing these open source investigations where you put an evidence bundle into a private Git repository. And then over time, you publish the commits as you work through the investigation. And then you can invite people based on a peer-to-peer level. And I'm just wondering whether maybe we should put this as an idea to the FBI and actually compete with them directly in this case.
There have been computer science researchers who tried this. They checked the settings of the server. The server was properly configured not to show its IP address, and typing random characters into the login box did not produce an IP address. It's possible that the FBI is speaking in code, and random characters really means SQL injection, and SQL injection is hacking, and the FBI is not allowed to hack. It's also possible they use the NSA backdoor. Will Pangman.
Yeah, it's a good thing for the defense that the case or the trial was delayed, and it hasn't been delayed a great deal, but a couple months, and that will give Ross more time to comb through the couple terabytes of data that he only recently got his hands on, as I understand. He's a smart guy. He'll be able to help his attorney craft his defense with more time to look at more and more of this material. So that's a good thing. It's also a strength for the prosecution as well, though, that we should acknowledge here. As you guys just pointed out, there's certainly shenanigans, whether it's from the bench, whether it's from the prosecution, or law enforcement, in terms of how this has been handled since day. So it's just important that folks continue to do their own research, pick apart the arguments on both sides, and determine their veracity on your own, hopefully without echoing or regurgitating third-party and indirect information.
It is a success for the prosecution as well that their terabytes of data have appropriately confused the defense. And doing a document review in prison, I just can't imagine that. Christoph Atlas.
Yeah, I would imagine it's a little bit, you're at a slight disadvantage if you can't get access to the internet to look stuff up as you're looking at this terabytes of data. Who knows what kind of software tools? Maybe he's looking at all this shit in Notepad for all we know, right? I wanted to take a look at this standard that the state had set up for itself in this case. We often, as libertarians, talk about the idea of a victimless crime, right? Like, if you can't point out the victim to me, then there's no crime here. Get out of here, throw it out of trial. You shouldn't be going after people for having little pieces of vegetation in their pocket and so forth. And the state says, well, no, that's not a reasonable standard. We don't need to find a victim for this crime. I'm the victim because I'm offended by your vegetation. Now, Ross's defense recently came to the judge with an argument that said, well, look, they've been violating our privacy trying to collect evidence for this case, so it's fruit of the poison tree, time to throw this case out. And the court says, well, look, if you you didn't say that this was your computer. So like if you can't point out who the owner of this computer is, then there was no crime here. The evidence is perfectly good in court. And so, you know, like if you want to admit to it being your computer, then maybe we can talk about this again. But unless you can say who the computer belongs to, there's no crime here. It's a victimless crime by the FBI. And I think that's one hell of a standard. I think that it's really highlights the participants in the case. You have Ross Ulbricht, who is the defendant, who's pretty much screwed. You have the FBI, who works for the government. You have the judge, who works for the government, the prosecutors that work for the government, and they're all trying to protect this money-making scheme called the US dollar and the war on drugs, which is all part of the government. It seems a little bit lopsided to me. Oh, not to mention the jurors, who have all been in indoctrination camps for 12 years of their life or more, also run by the government.
It also seems like they're using a catch-22 made by Dr. Seuss to finish this case off. Oh yeah, we can't tell you about the server unless you say it's your server. And if you say it's your server, we're going to hold that against you. It's a very childish thing to do. It doesn't seem like the work of adults. Exit question. One-word response. Guilty or not guilty?
The FBI guilty.
Will Pangman.
Fifth.
Christoph Atlas.
Under the law, probably guilty. Morally speaking, utterly not guilty.
It's unfortunate, but probably guilty. Moving on. Issue 2. Super Nintendo Losky alters bit license plan to exclude software developers and miners. Is the bit license plan just getting better every day? The NYDFS has still not released the risk assessment documents requested by the Bitcoin Foundation and continues to exist entirely in the shadows. Are they bending to public response? Will the final bit license be as horrible as the first draft? Will Pangman.
I find it amusing that they delay turning over their research with which they used supposedly to arrive at the first draft of this proposal for the bit license. When I think about people who delay delivery on something that's been promised, I think of procrastinators. I think of unprepared students for exams and final papers and things. And I'm pretty certain, well, I'm not certain, I'm pretty suspicious whether they have this research or did it at all, you know, did like a sufficient amount. There was a funny meme on Reddit, I think it was Reddit, or I saw it on Facebook maybe, but it's a picture of like a big paper recycling plant with all these bales and bales and bales of shredded paper, walls and walls of it, and some guy's like leaning on one like he's all, you know, take my picture. And it says, the bit license proposal comments. Like, you know, who knows if they're even doing this stuff. It did seem a bit more prepared and a bit more reasonable of a approach. I was surprised that they walked back some of these things, and they actually did provide some good clarity about how they plan to. They literally said not regulate, you know, without excuses. You're always looking for caveats with these guys. You know, you're always looking for but, you know, with these guys. And you didn't hear that. So those things are somewhat encouraging, but I want to caution folks to be vigilant, aware of a kind of, you know, there still be something hidden within the proposal that is really essentially crippling long-term, speaking of the technology and its potential, but will be something that most of the industry, per se, will agree with in light of some of these other concessions that were just made.
It does seem very much an unprofessional slapdash approach to regulation, and I don't think they actually made the documents, and they're definitely going to wait till after to reveal them, at which point they'll be pointless and worthless. Christoph Atlas.
Yeah, I think that they're in bed with the existing financial system. They're going to do whatever is going to benefit those folks. If they're making anything inconvenient at all, it's only because people in the existing financial system want to set up their own kind of blockchain type thingy. It's not going to be Bitcoin, of course, but some kind of Fed coin. And I think that's the full extent of their interest. And if by some magic we skate by with a relatively unrestrictive set of regulations, they're just going to make them more restrictive in the future. This is going to be a goalpost that continues to raise to the sky in the future, and it's going to be aggravating for everyone living in the state of New York.
Maybe Losky could just make his own coin, a New York coin or Losky coin. Chris Ellis.
I think this is actually fantastic news. They're going to stay away from the software developers, and anyone worth their salt and knows what they're doing is just going to end up creating peer-to-peer exchanges and completely make this whole thing a non sequitur. So I think it's really good news, and I think the regulators are just going to be chasing their tails. They're just going to end up doing circles and circles. They're never going to be able to keep up because all the innovators will do is just write software that gets around the regulation using this new loophole that they've created.
The internet sees censorship as damage and routes around it. Exit question. In a word, the bit license will be better or worse than the first draft. Will Pangman.
Will be slightly better.
Christoph Atlas.
Irrelevant.
Chris Ellis.
So I was going to say irrelevant.
Both of those are not valid word. It'll be slightly better, but still terrible. Moving on, issue 3, Bitcoin exchange troubles. Moolah never reopened MintPal and now has closed their doors. Bitstamp is terrifying users, saying that their unverified accounts will be closed and the funds handed over to unknown regulators in 28 days. And Cryptsy is down with technical problems. What is going on in Bitcoin exchanges today? Christoph Atlas.
I think people are still trying to kind of find their feet in this new area, because there's all these scam artists that were scam artists in the .com kind of era, and they were known scam artists in those communities. Now there's a whole new community of people to scam. And so I think that's one challenge, is figuring out which people in this space are actually reliable, who can be counted on for the word. Unfortunately, people that have a lot of entrepreneurial investing experience are also kind of scumbags as far as it goes to supporting the US dollar. And so we want to find someone that's capable, but a lot of people that are capable are also not trustworthy. Of course, what we need to always move towards is kind of a peer-to-peer decentralized way of doing this stuff. The exchanges really need to be peer-to-peer, and we need to evolve away from this type of system. And as long as the technology continues to lag behind, people, I think, are just inherently untrustworthy in a lot of ways, and so we're going to continue to find problems crop up.
But as long as they can use PowerPoint and create those scrolling web pages with the frames and all the information on one page, they're all right with me. Chris Ellis.
I knew this guy. I met him lots and lots of times. The guy is a shitball. He is a terrible, terrible person. If you meet him ever, you need to run away. I can't believe I knew him the whole time. He used to hang out in Shoreditch, he used to come to our meetups. He was a nasty piece of work. He used to piss people off, and he was driven out in the end. He started chatting up my friend, and he told me while she was gone to the loo, he said, I'm going to fuck her over breakfast tomorrow. And I warned her about him, and I said, look, stay away from him. And he was promising her he could get her a British passport and all this shit. And I was like, just stay away from him, he's dodgy. Anyway, he actually ripped off a friend of mine called Chris Layden, who interestingly made the Feathercoin video. Chris is a friend of mine, and he screwed him over for lots of money. I think he eventually did get his money out of him, but literally as he was on his way back to his parents in Wales, and he was on a train, and they basically drove him out of London. So I can't believe that all that time I knew who this guy was. I didn't recognize him because he changed his hairstyle. Actually, that wasn't when I knew him. I knew him. He didn't look like that anyway. Oh yeah, he looked like this when I knew him here. Okay, with this hairstyle, not with this hairstyle, not with glasses, not with the hair like that. So that's why I didn't recognize it, but I knew I recognized his voice from somewhere, and now I'm kicking myself because we did a video on this on Chris Before Coffee back in July, and I said this guy is not cool, he doesn't come across to me very well at all, and everyone's like, oh, that's slander, you can't say that against him, because everyone was having a go at Dogecoin for outing him in the first place, and I'm so happy now that they've been vindicated, and they put together this sort of open source investigation, seems to be catching on. And yeah, if you ever meet this guy, you just need to stay away from him. He's a really, really nasty piece of work. He's not going to do anything to you either. He's pathetic. He really is. He's just pathetic. He's weak and lonely and something. And I'm just so upset.
Why over breakfast? I'd prefer to eat first. Will Peng.
Yeah, so these exchanges are a piece of work, and the people behind them are, and time and time again, it's, I mean, just if you saw the rise of Bitcoin in the last week or since it's been out, those scenes with Mark Karpeles, if that couldn't be the most cringeworthy material ever, woo! So that's not to say that everyone who runs an exchange or wants to is this way, but I think what you have is people who set up like a little neighborhood company, and then because of the internet and because of this technology, they're able to scale it globally quickly. They're able to consolidate lots of interest quickly and gain lots of customers. And then, you know, they're not prepared for this. They're not prepared emotionally, psychologically, and certainly not with the technology of their websites either. Their business acumen, you know, whether or not this guy was telling the truth about just burning up his runway way too quickly with things like the Doge car and other things. Maybe that's all true, and that's not, I mean, that's a pretty fatal flaw, but it's not nefarious per se. So it's interesting. We're going to see this until we start having decentralized exchange. It's unfortunate that the killer app for Bitcoin is the buy and sell. And I say that's unfortunate because, you know, that it's a pretty crappy killer app. I mean, none of these websites work really, really well. I think Bitfinex is one that I've used that I think looks nice, works nice, easy for people to learn. They're doing a good job, it seems. You know, who knows what'll come out of the woodwork about any of these folks. So I hope Cryptsy gets back online, because they were kind of like, even though their UI sucks, they're kind of like this shining jewel of a US altcoin exchange that's actually, you know, like growing and seems to be growing well. So we'll see. Yeah, decentralized exchange, come here soon, please.
And remember, no one should be storing their money in an exchange long term. An exchange is a place where you take your money, put it on the counter, exchange it for another type of currency, and walk out with your money. If you leave your money on the counter, it might not be there when you come back. Christoph Atlas, exit question, what is your trusted exchange? You kind of have to choose one.
I like Cryptsy.
Even with the downtime, sticking with Cryptsy. Chris Ellis.
You actually like Cryptsy? I'm not letting that one slide. You told everyone to get off when they accepted dollars.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I wouldn't leave your stuff on there for any length of time, but they have a pretty decent record, I would say, overall. They definitely had some like rocky stuff when they were first starting out, with people's funds like temporarily going missing and stuff like that. But lately, I think they've been, certainly as for me as a customer, they've been quite reliable.
God, I mean, you send funds there, it doesn't show up for like a day or 2 days. You got to write to their support, and then they say, "Oh yeah, sorry, that shouldn't have happened," and then it's like, God, it's unmanageable for me. Okay, I don't like any of them, but if you watched my live stream the other day with Sarah Mickelson at UCL, I actually said that ironically I think BTC-E is the most reliable of all the exchanges, because they're not interested in screwing you over as a customer, because they need you to help them do whatever it is they're really doing behind the scenes. And that's why every year or so they tell you never to send any more Bitcoins to your old deposit addresses. Why? Because they're wiping the database on the inside. They want to know that if they get raided, that there's no evidence there. So I'm not saying that they're up to no good. All I'm saying is that, ironically, the bad guys are the people, the criminals are the people you can trust now, because the real criminals are the people in charge.
Will Pangman, what's your favorite exchange?
I was going to agree with Chris, and I was thinking during his response, I would say local Bitcoins is my favorite.
It's a good choice. Moving on, issue 4, Hong Kong heats up. It all started Tuesday when police moved in and began dismantling barricades, and it's been a game of cat and mouse ever since. The police move in and take a street. The protesters come back in much larger numbers and take it back. The World Crypto Network's own reporter on the ground, James Bang, has been assaulted by police on multiple occasions and is risking his life in the field to bring us live video footage of these events on the World Crypto Network YouTube channel. The Bitcoin group would like to praise James for his dedication and focus on this important project. Chris Ellis, I ask you, what's going on in Hong Kong?
Like, all credits to James. Like, the guy's a hero, absolute hero. And to think that he got in touch with me and he was so like, oh, Chris, you're my hero. You know, you persuaded me to leave your job. Yeah, but you're the one that's went out. Look at how things have changed. You know, he's now gone up to like police officers with his camera. He's absolutely brilliant. And it'd be really cool if we could get him some help to get a flak jacket. He needs a helmet. He needs to print out that ID. I don't know how he's getting on with that because I wasn't in tune today with things, but yeah, we have
press identification now. It's printed out and laminated.
Right.
We would like to see him get a flak jacket, or it was also recommended a bicycle helmet. It would be lighter and more common.
Yeah, he needs to get a helmet, man, because otherwise he's going to give himself a brain hemorrhage. He's been knocked over that many times. He often calls me on Skype when he's in the hospital saying, oh, I'm all right, but he's not all right, you know, and you can tell. And he's got a daughter as well. She's only young, and he's got a family, so he needs to think about this stuff. So I think it's great that the Chinese government are caving in and are giving in to anger and hatred and violence, because that will just make the protesters more resilient.
The people there have certainly lost trust in their police department. It clearly seems they're not working for the people that are paying them. Will Pengman.
Again, I want to echo what Chris was saying. Credit to James, huge credit to him for not only doing what he's doing there for the people in Hong Kong, but bringing the information, the on-the-ground information, to the rest of the world through his videos and, you know, his courage. So this is like one of the most amazing things that we can do now as kind of like, you know, our voluntary little global communities, little families that we set up. WCN is an example of that. There are many platforms like this where we can connect with people, you know, on the ground and really get the truth out, really get the real story out from a primary source on the ground. That's priceless. So huge credit to James. What's going on in Hong Kong? The same thing that's going on, you know, in many other places in the world, whether it's the Arab Spring or Occupy or all these other things. This is a trend that's been seen and written about in the circles of power for about 15 years at least on the regular, and that is that people around the world are growing increasingly frustrated and angry towards the soft tyrannies and limitations that are being put around them. In some cases, much firmer, harder tyrannies. In many cases, just incrementalism, really restricting human freedom and association and speech most often. So people are upset, and they're making that very obvious. And now, where we didn't have the ability to take a bird's eye view or man-on-the-street view of these kinds of conflicts in several years ago and years prior, now we do, thanks to broadband, thanks to mobile, thanks to the internet, and thanks to groups like the WCN, who can bring this information to the world.
It is truly amazing what James has been able to do with only a cell phone and a microphone. He's broadcasting live. The other journalists all ask him, like, when does your show go on? What are you doing? He's like, no, it's live right now. It's actually happening. And they look a little outdated with their big cameras, and they're going home to upload some video and going home to look at some photos. That's so passé. That's like 1990s. Like, you sure you guys are with us in the aughts here? Christoph, Atlas.
I'm not really sure what to make of this movement exactly. I don't think that democracy is inherently a useful or positive thing. I hope that the outcome of the movement is a greater skepticism towards government in general. If the movement is specifically about a segue from a more totalitarian government to a more democracy-based government, to me that's pretty much a lateral move. I know that on one hand, the state in China and the state that's being imposed on Hong Kong in particular, is doing some pretty terrible stuff. I read about a woman that had been killed, like the government wanted her house and they just like bulldozed the house while she was still in there, and some pretty sick stuff that you wouldn't see that exact type of crime in the United States. There's certainly plenty of civil forfeiture in stealing of houses and so forth, but they do make sure to at least escort the people out of the house before they bulldoze it. So I guess that's a small positive. But on the other hand, economically speaking, Hong Kong is in much better shape than the United States is. Many people expatriate from the United States to Hong Kong for more favorable treatment in terms of the economic situation. So I hope that I hope that the economic freedom, to the extent that Hong Kong currently enjoys it, is not compromised by this movement towards a sort of greater democracy, so to speak. I think it really should be about skepticism about government and finding ways for people to come together and solve things on their own peacefully and voluntarily. And certainly I think the protests perfectly peaceful, perfectly voluntary, and so I think that they should continue with that.
It is a very unique situation in history where Hong Kong, a former British colony, has been handed back to the Chinese. This is pretty much their chance to stand up and say something before they become permanently a part of China. This is kind of the last gasp of democracy there, and you don't know which way it's going to go. Are they going to get wiped out, or is this democracy idea going to spread to China? People are going to be occupying the Great Wall next? Like we've seen Occupy type Arab Spring movements in Egypt, Libya, all over the world. It could pop up anywhere, and I'm sure that's what their government's worried about as well. Exit questions. Stay safe, James. Moving on to question and answer. Still a chance to get your questions in. We only have a couple. We're going to move through them. We're starting off with this one from Chad Crypto. Oh my! Chris went back in time and is transmitting through an old black and white camera. This perhaps fits in with Bryce Wiener's theory on Twitter that Chris is really Bob Dylan. If you look at an old frame from the Don't Look Back documentary by D.A. Paybaker, Chris, i.e. Dylan, is clearly visible. And remember that this documentary is also when Dylan was visiting the United Kingdom, the same place that Chris currently lives. There could even be some Highlander throw-ins as well to explain the lack of aging. So there is definitely something going on in England. Our next question from Michael Schroeder is, can you name 3 things or so about Bitcoin that I could tell people that want to get into Bitcoin? I often go for not opening yourself to future payments, fast payments, and via internet. But there's quite a few different ways to go. So what would you guys say? What do you usually say to people? Like just one really quick thing. Why should they try Bitcoin? Chris is frowning. We'll start off with him.
I usually say they shouldn't unless they've got a reason to, because I don't like selling things to people, really. I think you should educate people because it gives them control over their money is usually what I tell them. It puts it under your control.
I think part of the trick is not to try to sell them all at once. Yes, you're excited about Bitcoin. Yes, I'm excited about Bitcoin, but you and I have probably read a lot of things about it, maybe watched some videos. You know, there's a lot of research that built that excitement. They're not going to do that right away. So just getting the idea out there, just, hey, there is this Bitcoin. You don't have to try it, but it's going to get bigger and bigger. And whether you join it or not, it's going to come to you again eventually. So just repetition. Will Penguin, what do you like to say to people to try Bitcoin?
I try to find things that are simple to understand, and like Chris said too, not to sell them, but just to open a can of worms gently for them, kind of. So electronic cash, or currency for the people, by the people. You know, it's managed by everyone and no one, and it's digitally scarce. It's the first, you know, invention of that sort. Digitally scarce good for the first time. And you know, sometimes if I can tell what kind of an audience they're coming from, or what kind of a background they come from, then I might use something that really caters to that set. So if I know they're a gold bug, then I'll say this is hard digital money for the first time, you know. Or if they're, you know, very left-leaning usually, then I'll say this is the most egalitarian form of money that's ever existed. It's open to the whole world for free. Something simple like that.
So you have to shape your pitch depending on who you're dealing with. I think that's a good point. Also, trying it out. if they have an iPhone or an Android phone, getting them to install a wallet, make a username and password, and then sending them a quarter or a dollar, just something so they can see, wow, the value moved from his phone to my phone. That's pretty neat. Christoph, Atlas.
I think people care about causes quite a bit, and so if you can find out what types of causes they care about, there may be a way to appeal to people in that regard. Not too long ago, people were quite excited about the idea of microloaning to the underprivileged in other countries, and I think Bitcoin can really facilitate with that. I know there's lately a lot of talk about, what are the fees going to be like? Should we change the block size and blah blah blah? But fundamentally, I think that cryptocurrencies in general, whether it's going to be Bitcoin or some other cryptocurrency, they're really going to be able to help these people quite a bit. For them to be able to connect with from the third world to the first world, do business in real time, that's just like an amazing capability that is really going to allow people to pull themselves up by their bootstraps. So I think, if you can find out about what kind of causes they're interested in and tie that to Bitcoin, that can be quite helpful.
Very good. Moving on to the next question. Are you aware of a group calling itself Bitcoin Group is launching an IPO in Oz? I assume that's Australia. Has there been any confusion between you and them? Well, certainly there is some confusion. Certainly we don't officially own this name or anything, and it's quite possible we could be the Bitcoin Group and they could be Bitcoin Group. And I guess that's okay. There's certainly, in Australia, we're in the U.S., we don't really have any copyright lawyers. We're not going to look for that. I hope they would do the same, especially considering we have prior art on this. But I don't think there'd be that much confusion. Chris, do you have an article about this or something else? Something in the chat too.
Yes, I did. So this is the article that he linked to in CoinDesk. Bitcoin Group seeks to launch world's first Bitcoin IPO. Yeah, the world's first Bitcoin IPO. Of course it is.
Everything with world's first is usually wrong.
Who writes this shit? Anyway.
Wonderful comment. Will, you had a comment on the Bitcoin Group?
I personally could care less if there's 5 different Bitcoin groups or the Bitcoin groups or any mixture of the set. The bottom line is the folks who know of us and our work or the show or this network, they will always be familiar with this brand, if you will, being associated with what we're doing here. And if there's another idea that isn't necessarily competing in a whole different industry per se, and they share the name, then they have to compete for brand recognition and reach and stuff over there. Just because you had the name first doesn't mean that you can be the only one. This isn't Highlander. This is, Bitcoin, and it's open to everybody always, and there's room for everyone.
The way to my heart is definitely through Highlander references. It would have been nice to see CoinDesk mention us in the article. There's also a popular web show called the Bitcoin Group, maybe a link. Same for the New York.
They're definitely going to do that after all the things that we've said about them on here.
And the time recently where I went to the top of Reddit for calling them a tabloid. Yeah.
Wasn't that article clearly just a paid advertisement?
Like Captain Obvious. Yeah, of course it is. That's what they do. That's exactly what they do. This is not the first time. I haven't forgotten, Emily, if you're watching this, by the way. We're not going to let you forget about that article that you published about BTC Market Maker where he scammed somebody out of 40 Bitcoins because of your article. It's not on. This is bullshit. It's so obviously a scam. I have not met a single person in. I'm doing this investigation at the moment. I'm putting it in the blockchain. I want to put all the crimes against Bitcoin into Bitcoin's blockchain, so it becomes a self-referential prosecution of its own fucking sinful, dirty frauds that infest this whole industry. It is so obviously a paid-for article. Just the whole way it's laid out. And if you look in the comments, just like there was on BTC Market Maker, this looks like a scam. Can you not see it? High spirits today.
They also, as recently reported by Roger Ver on Twitter and reported in my video, they don't pay their authors in Bitcoin. They instead use wire transfers, if you could understand or comprehend that. And I've also heard that sometimes they don't even pay their authors at all. So I would be careful when dealing with that company. Moving on to
they're actually interested in community-oriented stories either, or stories about the little guy, quite explicitly, actually.
Yeah, they do seem to be very focused on the top-down view of Bitcoin, CEOs, etc. And again, going back to the paid articles, that's probably more better for paid articles. We've got a comment from Jay Saborski who writes, any comment on the Newsweek lawsuit? And this, of course, refers to Dorian Satoshi Nakamoto, who is finally suing Newsweek, who failed to retract their article, failed to apologize, and failed to begin making amends for outing his personal address, sending all those reporters to his house, making him and his family unsafe, saying that he might be the creator of Bitcoin. I definitely support the lawsuit. What do you guys think? Chris?
Yeah, I think so too. You have to hold these crooked people accountable, and I know the community really well did this when the story was fresh. They held this author accountable and that publication accountable. It got out quickly. The truth got out quickly because of the grassroots or guerrilla efforts of community, amateur investigators and stuff. And this is what we want to encourage. This is what we try to do here. Chris's idea. Hopefully, I'm Chris. I can't wait to see you produce this or help you produce this, like a rubric, so that people can do this. What you're doing with embedding information into the blockchain, that they can do this themselves too, and we can kind of, scale it organically like that. That's a great idea. So yeah, I lost my train of thought, guys. Take over.
I got one. After Dorian wins his lawsuit, he should rename Newsweek to Bitcoin Week. Christoph, what do you think about the lawsuit?
Yeah, the thing that's a little bit awkward for me about this story is the idea of Dorian like crowdfunding his lawsuit. My understanding is that the idea of a lawsuit is like, well, there's a risk that you're going to win it or lose it, right? If you win it, you get some monetary damages, in which case, hooray for you, right? If you lose it, then you lose out on your initial investment into the lawsuit, and I think it's a good idea to have those kind of incentive structures in place in the legal system, because you don't want it to be an over litigious society. And many lawyers will take the case on the basis of saying, well, I'm not going to charge you anything for it, but in the case that we win, I take a percentage of the winnings or whatever it is. So it does seem a little bit odd to me that he's sort of crowdfunding this this war as if like the Bitcoin community has some like dog in the fight exactly. It's really like it's a personal thing at this point. It's his personal the impact that Newsweek had on his family, and it feels a little bit weird to me that he's asking the Bitcoin community when he hasn't really given much to the Bitcoin community at this point for funding for that.
It seems like an obvious chance for one of those token systems. Why didn't he just make Dorian coin on Counterparty, and then if they win the lawsuit, you could get paid more money for your coins? And not that I'm sure that's legal, but if that was legal, they could certainly do that. We've also got a question from Jay. Says, anyone have an opinion on Jamie Dimon's latest comment? Bitcoin can't compete without regulation. Are we already competing, winning? He also said that Bitcoin was threatening to eat their lunch. And this is after he'd previously said that Bitcoin was a bad store of value. So I definitely think he's starting to hedge, he's starting to shift, and it's great to be in competition with one of the largest banks in the world when you're just an open source computer project. That must be very humbling for them. Any thoughts on this, Chris? Jamie Dimon?
Jamie Dimon without the D is guy another filthy fraud. So
word.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of his, to be honest.
Will.
He's never been a believer, which tells me, or even given the idea of Bitcoin and blockchain tech credit at all. And much of his colleagues are coming around to that, at least giving this invention some credit. And that tells me he has discounted it and underestimating it, and at his detriment.
He's probably going to be the last one at the table to realize that he's the mark. Christoph, what do you think?
I do not understand this idea that journalists have of like citing him on his opinion about Bitcoin. like you're as if they're going to go to the titans of the buggy and horse industry and ask them about what they think about automobiles. They're very skeptical about it. It's like, oh well, they're the experts. They've been in this this transportation industry for a long time. So this whole car thing is probably not going anywhere. It just kind of blows my mind that people are so naive that they think they could just insert these opinions from clearly heavily biased people, like billions of dollars at stake, and submit this as like an expert opinion. It's interesting.
I think it was Henry Ford who said something like, "If I gave the people what they wanted, they'd want faster horses." Got another great short question. Does anyone care about Apple Pay? I don't. Well, I care about Apple Pay. I think it's fascinating. I'm very impressed with what they did tokenizing the credit cards, something the credit card industry couldn't do themselves for the last 20 years of internet adoption. Actually, a secure credit card you can use on the internet, and theoretically it hasn't been tested or proven yet. I also think there could be a Bitcoin wallet in there eventually, and that they are doing our job for us by convincing people to stop swiping those old-fashioned cards and start paying with your phone. And once you're paying with your phone, well, you could use Apple Pay or you could use Bitcoin. So once again, a billion-dollar company competing with an open-source software project. We're going to win.
Yeah.
Will, what do you think?
I would totally let them help us onboard people to mobile payments as much as they want to. I mean, we're having a damn hard time convincing people, we being the Bitcoin community or advocates or evangelists, we're having a hard time convincing people to go to mobile payments. So here's the other thing. Apple and Google and these companies are behemoths that Apple's not only working on a payments engine for mobile payments, they're involved in hardware, software, they're involved in all kinds of things. So they have to have a lot of public relations fires to put out constantly. And there will be some big ones coming soon because they've built a lot of their technology on the broken open internet, and as we saw with the iCloud celebrity, the fappening thing, like that happening did not give them enough bad press, I don't think, because we didn't emphasize the security enough. It was all about victim blaming and blah blah blah. The problem with that is they're going to have more problems, and we will be there to mop up on their problems because we don't have the security concerns. We, as in Bitcoin users and Bitcoin fans, don't have the problem in this technology that they are dealing with.
The fappening was especially well timed for the Apple taking over credit card announcements. It was very much, you can trust us with your digital photos. Now trust us with your credit cards. Very much a surprise.
I think we do need Apple's help on this stuff. When you put them in charge of advertising, you get that famous 1984 commercial. When you put Braintree in charge of it, you get this video ransom note. And so I think that we should probably use them to the fullest extent that we can.
I definitely think that commercial still haunts my dreams. All those faces talking at the same time. It's like the computer in Tron or something. One of those big the computer in Hackers really is the one I'm thinking of. We've also got a question from Jay. He says, where can I get my Mad Bitcoins Halloween costume? That's a good question. I'd like to see people dressing up themselves, perhaps their children, as Mad Bitcoins this year. The general look is pretty easy. You get some good goggles, get yourself a nice hat, maybe a little Bitcoin sticker or a logo, a nice suit perhaps. You're on your way.
Or your dog.
Or your dog. I've got some dogs. We should do some dog Mad Bitcoin pictures.
Would it not be Mad Dogecoins at that point?
Mad Dogecoins. See, then they'll like me. They'll all come around then. They'll be like, he's finally on board with the Doge. We got rid of the Moolah people. He thinks it's cool now. And we're going to move on to predictions or story of the week. Will, do you have a prediction or a story of the week?
I guess, I don't know if this is a prediction, but I think the delaying tactic of government or court or the regulatory process or whatever, that's like a built-in feature for them. Delaying doesn't help the technology advance. It keeps would-be entrepreneurs from starting up. They're on the sidelines waiting for an answer. It keeps a lot of capital sitting still when it could be flowing. It's hurting, and I think they know that. I think that's part of the strategy here. So delaying the trial, just gives them more time to get to weaken the support for Ross Ulbricht, and gives them more time to craft. They have endless resources, whereas the defense does not, right? So more time for them is better than more time for the defense. So in the case of the law scheme and the regulation, I agree with Andreas. Bad regulation in New York would be bad for Bitcoin. That's true. But I also don't care what the answer is. I want to get on with things. I want to see more of these companies I've heard about sitting on the sidelines starting up. And they've got great ideas. And I don't care where they stand ideologically. They have good products they're ready to bring to market. And if these products are built around like zero knowledge and built around full direct end user privacy and these kinds of ethics, which a lot of people are calling for in tech, not regardless of their ideology, they're calling for this. And so as long as these products are along those philosophical lines, technologically speaking, then we need them, and they're being delayed and delayed and delayed. People are delaying like innovations such as like multi-sig setups and things because they want to understand what the regulation around multi-sig will be, and they don't understand what that is until there's an approved regulation that's passed. So this isn't really a prediction, and just a rant about this delay tactic and how really frustrating it is. This is why we've had you can see the patterns in the price following past years still, even though it's been down since January. But the patterns are pretty much the same-ish. However, the price is down, and it's not really there isn't as much excitement by and large on the edges, right? The excitement's within when you're in a company building it or when you're in a project building it. And I think this is because people are just waiting for an answer. Let's get to the answer. Let's get to the acting and not the talking anymore, for crying out loud. They don't need to do any more research or have any more comments. They have Andreas' speech in front of Canada and the bevy of quality comments that they've gotten if they've read them. That's plenty of research, even if they did zero research prior to it. So write the dang thing. I just want an answer. I don't care if it's the most draconian thing coming out of New York. The world will move on. Let's move on.
You're right, Will. Those companies should get in the game. Usually it's better to beg for forgiveness than to ask for permission. Christoph, Atlas.
My story of the week is about Keith Alexander, the former director of the NSA. By the way, if you're not sure whether the NSA is a civilian organization or a military organization that launches offenses around the world, just look at the guy who is leading the organization and the number of little flag pins that he has on his uniform. So he resigned from the NSA. He's the former director, and now he's making like a ridiculous sum of money per hour as a consultant. And so some Congress people were like, well, what's up with this? Like, he's kind of an idiot. I mean, we put him in the director position of the NSA, so he probably can't actually do any shit, right? Like, he's got political connections. He has access to classified material, but what on earth would he be paid to consult for thousands of dollars per hour? And he must be just giving away state secrets. And so then Keith Alexander says this week, no, what happened was immediately after I left the NSA, I picked back up this side project that I've been doing in my spare time, tinkering around in the garage. I've designed a system that is extremely good at identifying and combating APTs, or which stands for Advanced Persistent Threats. This is like a slang term that came up in InfoSec in the last decade, and it was referred to like these, units from the Chinese military cyber army and various like very well-funded, well-organized organizations trying to hack into stuff. And so what he's basically trying to sell people on is like, yeah, I just it has nothing to do with what I had access to the NSA. I had access to all this information about the Chinese military and the Russian military and the U.S. military doing all the hacking stuff. It's nothing to do with that. It's just been something I've been tinkering around in the basement on the weekends, and I'm now launching a company around this amazing invention that I came up with. It's like if President Obama, like after he got out of office, was like, yeah, and also like I designed the next rocket for NASA, you'd be like, what are you talking about? That's not credible at all. So basically, I think it's kind of delicious in a way because it just shows how like ridiculous and farcical the whole system is, that there'd be this guy who supposedly is working his hardest, his damnedest to secure the country, and then immediately after he has this proprietary idea that he didn't share with the NSA supposedly, that he's now going to make his next $10 million off of. It's just a revolving door between people operating in the government and starting these semi-fascistic corporations that get all of their money from governments. And you go in one door and out the other, and now I'm the director of this, and now I'm the CEO of that, and now I'm the head appointee of this committee for the government. It's from the banking sector to the military to just about every damn part of the whole state, and it's a good laugh.
That's great to hear that General Alexander is starting a second NSA in his garage, because that's what we really need another of. Now we're going to go to Chris Ellis, who's doing his best Simon and Garfunkel album cover impression. Mr. Chris.
Hello, yes, welcome back. I got disconnected from the internet, but not for long. It was a futile attempt to censor me to give my story of the week, which is the blockchain passport. So we had a chat the other night with Suzanne Tempelhoff at BitNation, and there was lots of controversy over it possibly being a scam, and I thought I'd interview her since no other journalist was, journalist in quotes that is. Everyone was just taking Nathan Wozniak's side of the story. Sorry, I mean all the people that resigned, but of course it had nothing to do with him. And I was just troubled me, this idea of like, how do you prove someone's existence in space and in time? And I'd sort of been thinking about this when I was at the Bitcoin squat a lot. I'd just been pacing up and down with too much coffee. So I set about the task of trying to do this with available tools. So if you go to my GitHub /Mr. Chris J, world-citizenship, I've come up with this proposal, which is world citizenship creating affordable decentralized passport services using available cryptographic tools, right? So it's just using what we've already got available to us, no coding anything, no $2 million funding rounds, none of that. Let's just hack this shit, right? And I realized you actually could do it. And I had to do a few things to make it work, but if you bear with me, I'm going to take you through it now. So essentially, you invite everyone to a meetup, preferably a commercial venue. I'll explain why in a moment. You give them a quick tutorial on password managers. They'll have been told before they come to clue themselves up on this, and this is basically an opportunity for the organizers to get a sense of how educated these people are. They know what they're getting themselves in for. And then each person at the meetup takes it in turns, sit down in front of a webcam. They have their picture taken. They then go off to a private room. They generate a new PGP key, preferably that's air-gapped. You can use something like the crypto stick, which is a USB stick that can sign your transactions for you, like the Trezor with Bitcoin. And then what we do is we create an HTML document that has your picture on it, has your PGP identifier up at the top, has a biometric, this is called a fingerprint, which if you actually read out, you could even read it into a video, it will actually redeem your public key again. It contains the latest block height with the Merkle root, proving that this happened at this time and no earlier. It then has a QR code that you can scan in, which will then take you to more information. It could be like a Keybase account, one of these accounts, which you can then use to sign with the same key. You can then sign all of your social media accounts, proving those. You then take the hash of this document along with the image, and you sign it with your PGP key. You then take the resulting hash of that, and you put it into the blockchain itself, preferably with your identity number at the top. Now, what you've just done is you proved that this document in this form existed in this state at this time, right? Because you've done a few things here. What you've done is you put the Merkle root in, proving it kind of happened prior. You've then locked it down with your PGP key by signing it, which means that you can't change the document now without making it noticeable. You've then put it into the blockchain, meaning it couldn't have existed any time later. So you've locked down the creation of this document to a time period of about 10 minutes. And then what we're going to do, and this was the hardest part that I struggled with, how could you prove where it took place? Because GPS can be faked so easily. And then I realized businesses have an incentive to advertise their location in space. When you publish a Bitcoin transaction on the blockchain, you reveal your IP address to the nodes that hear you first. So what you do is you get the business itself to sign the transactions into the blockchain, preferably from an account that they've had other customers pay into, thus proving and leaving a trail of evidence behind you that that business really did exist at that address. And of course, businesses go out of their way to publicize their addresses, right? They go onto Google, so there's plenty of backed up data. So that will be stored in local debug log files. Also, the Ethereum crew, Vlad is working on something called proof of custody, which will make this easier, because then you'll actually be able to utilize the log files that people store on their Bitcoin nodes that are locally. And so then what you can do is you can print out their nice fancy passport. You can brand it as BitNation passports, World Crypto Network passports. Pick your brand like you pick your coffee, right? I am a citizen of this now, and because I think that these guys have got a really good reputation. Once you've got your PGP key, you should then go around the room and encourage people to sign your PGP key, thus adding weight to the fact that you were there. And so if you come up to somebody like me and I've got a personality and I'm on the internet and everyone knows me and Chris has signed your key, then it's pretty likely that you exist, right? This does now, what's critical here is, so I've modeled this on the latest, the way that they're doing passports now. So you've got the identifier here, you've got the encryption algorithm and the block cipher there, how strong it is, and then the fact that it's been verified, but that would only be verified by the organization, by the organizers of the meetup. What's critical to this is the expiry date. Obviously, someone could steal your PGP key and then you're fucked, because then they can go around pretending to be you, and now you've created a false sense of confidence. So we do need to come up with a protocol for how we can revoke these keys in the event that they're lost. I would love to get your suggestions. Obviously, this is on GitHub, which means you can fork it, and I would encourage you to do that. And so, yeah, I've just left some notes down here about how this can then be linked to reputation systems. I put in, obviously, there are some ethical concerns, and I've addressed those. I've also put in a journal which kind of describes my thinking as I was going through it, so that you can see what my intentions are and what I was thinking. My underlying assumption is that by recognizing the things that we share in common, we give ourselves more space to discover our uniqueness and our differences. And my understanding is that, look, at the moment, I'm not trying to globalize the world and make everyone the same. I'm trying to get us to understand that what we have in common is a responsibility on our conduct towards scarce resources, not that we should all be the same, wear the same thing. I think that's a completely backward way of thinking about it. So you can head over to my GitHub, tell me what you think about this. It is kind of obviously linked a bit to the blockchain investigation idea, where, you know, we put bundles of evidence inside of Git repositories and then publish the commits over time to prove the state of the evidence and it wasn't tampered and so on. But I got more mileage today out of that idea than I was getting out of the other one, so I'm kind of, my ADHD is going nuts.
Chris, can you do you have a favorite kind of use case for these passports that you can share with us?
Yes, so I'd really like to go to Calais in north of France, because Calais, by law, has to defend the British border in France on behalf of the British. It's such a nice agreement we got away with. And of course, they've ended up being screwed, because all of the immigrants that come from Africa and the Middle East and a lot of war-torn countries end up in Calais, and then they're not allowed through. And it's actually the French peoples that end up having to stop them, and a lot of these people are stateless. They have literally nowhere to go, and it just breaks my heart every time I see it come on the screen. Like, these people deserve. I'm not worth more than them. My life isn't worth more than their life. Like, I should be able to go there and help them, you know, listen to them. Like, what are their ideas? What do they want to do? Like, you should be helping people, not hindering them. And I just think it would be, so at the moment, it's an art project. It's a proof of concept. It's nothing more than that. I'm not expecting anyone to take this seriously. Other people have tried doing independent passports before. But the idea is that you could then link this to social networking, right? And then I can then see that you are that person from your image. You could even do a video and do voice recognition. You could do all kinds of things. I don't want to get biometrics into it right now, because they're quite dangerous if they're not treated properly. But then if you start linking that to reputation systems online, I didn't show you the way Keybase works, which is genius, is you just go around leaving your PGP signature. So here you can see, like, this is my Reddit, okay, and then I left a message here, which I signed, which then links back to my profile. So you're creating a chain of trust. And then when you go to these meetups, you're just checking in at these meetups. I just need to find a way of like doing double blind, because obviously you don't want everyone to know where you are. A lot of people wouldn't want their location being exposed all the time. So you need a way of zero knowledge proofing the fact that you have been verified by someone who's trustworthy.
It occurs to me that something like this could have been useful in the Moolah case, where you had this ethicless CEO who you were familiar with. He had a bad reputation with you and with other members of the London meetup, and if only people had access to that information, if he was forced to present this type of information to other people, and that could be linked to his reputation with you guys, then I think that the story could have played out quite a bit differently, right?
Yeah, absolutely, because governments are too slow. And a lot of, like, there was a guy who I met at the Bitcoin squat who was wanted by the police, and apparently the police were just stalking him, getting him to come in to be arrested on appointment. I was like, what do you mean go in to be arrested on appointment? I don't know about these things. And he's like, oh, well, they don't have the resources to come and get me, so they just asked me to come in, and they just pester him the whole time. And it's like, apparently he even walked past the police officer who didn't even, he's like, he had the ability to arrest me and he didn't, because he was just, you know, couldn't be bothered with the paperwork. It was too much trouble. So it gives people a way of self-policing and of saying, actually, before you get involved, if you don't want to tell everyone else who you are, tell me, I'll sign your key, and then I'll just vouch for you to the rest of the world. But I realized, as I was talking to Susanna last night, is that she was trying to do too much. I actually think that she's got a lot of energy, a lot of passion. I don't know her well enough to vouch for her integrity, but so far I'm like, yeah, okay, you completely mismanaged this by the looks of it, and it's gone a bit of a clusterfuck. But the ideas are sound. Why don't we concentrate on those rather than name calling? And one of the sort of the eureka moment today was when I realized that what you were actually trying to do was to incentivize this private passport service. Rather than incentivizing people to get the passports, you're actually incentivizing entrepreneurs to set up this business, right? Because you could sell these passports, right? You're leveraging your reputation, right? If you've been in a town all your life and your parents were in there the whole life before, yeah, you've got a great reputation now. You can now leverage that and start selling it by setting up this passport service. Of course, I want to use Joe down the road. Everyone knows Joe. Everyone trusts Joe. If he gives me a passport, everyone will trust me by virtue of that. So I realized if we get all the equipment down, like the laptop, the printer, the webcam, if you get all that below $200, just have it as a nice, neat little package with some instructional videos and full documentation, away you go. It's unstoppable then.
Sounds like an excellent project. Moving on, prediction. New York's BIT license will be a spectacular failure. It will make the mistakes of Britain's Red Flag Act look childish in comparison. New York will lose an entire industry, and it will not be the financial capital of the world in the future. This is a major turning point for an entire U.S. state. It's all in the hands of one uneducated man. That's right, Super Nintendo. For all your law degrees and other pieces of paper, you don't understand Bitcoin, and yet you're going to attempt to regulate it. A classic blunder, like starting a land war in Asia. Humpty Dumpty is about to make a great fall. The Emperor has no clothes. All the king's horses and all the king's men could never put him back together again. Remember, Losky, once you choose, and choose poorly, people will know not to do business with New York. We're out of time. Until next time, bye-bye.